faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we'll discuss the book Human Trafficking and Family Life in Late Qing and Republican China. The study focuses on North China, where late Qing famines and warfare caused immense suffering, turning human trafficking into a survival mechanism for families. By the early Republican era, commercialization, transportation development, and social mobility transformed society. A gray market flourished, trading concubines, servants, laborers, child brides, prostitutes, apprentices, and adopted children. Families across classes relied on trafficking to manage domestic needs, discarding unwanted children, acquiring servants, obtaining reproductive services, or absorbing new members. And these transactions permeated nearly every North Chinese household. While not all participated, everyone knew neighbors who bought servants or poor families selling children or women. When needed, people knew how to find traffickers and employ their services. Though legally banned since late Qing, trafficking occupied ambiguous legal territory. Officially illegal yet tolerated case by case. So, what was this civil trafficking market like 150 years ago?
Why did prohibitions repeatedly fail?
What social conditions perpetuated it? Answers lie within today's book. Author Susan Glosser, University of Chicago East Asia researcher and Yale PhD, specializes in Chinese family life and law. She wrote this book using Qing magistrate reports, Republican police archives, and local court documents. Through late Qing trafficking cases, the book examines trafficking of women, children, and laborers, analyzing underlying family structures and socio-legal factors during societal transformation. Edmund Sands Steve. Next, I'll break it down into 3 parts for you. The main content of the book. Part 1, I'll trace the process of a young woman being repeatedly sold. Part 2, I'll focus on the abduction of children and overseas laborers during the late Qing period. Part 3, I'll tell you why human trafficking in late Qing and Republican China was repeatedly banned but became even more rampant. Let's focus on women as fukai, so-called fukai, with fu meaning floating and kai meaning wealth, refers to movable property. Women at that time were seen as movable property that could be transferred between different families. In turbulent times, population is an asset, and women are the easiest to sacrifice. In the latter half of the 19th century, the late Qing dynasty was in turmoil, enduring decades of civil wars and rebellions internally, and invasions by European naval powers externally. And the Opium Wars left the Qing economy and society crumbling. To raise funds and labor for reconstruction, local magistrates extorted the people more harshly. Many families, to survive, turned their eyes to the women at home. Women were the most flexible part of a feudal family's insurance policy. Young women of childbearing age had reproductive and labor value, and with the severely imbalanced gender ratio at the time, buying and selling women became even more profitable. Moreover, China's traditional marriage and family hierarchy provided an umbrella for large-scale female trafficking. In arranged marriages, the most important thing was the bride price. The bride price rationalized all forms of female trade, even illegal trafficking. The book records one such typical case of female trafficking. Between 1870 and 1872, the daughter of scholar Chen Yuqing was sold 4 times. She was sold successively as a wife, a concubine, a surrogate room, and finally bought back as an exhausted daughter. Both men and women organized these transactions, claiming they did it just to survive. Indeed, those years marked the beginning of famine. In the coming decade, first came continuous floods, then droughts and deadly famines, killing over 13 million people from hunger and disease, and thousands of families chose to sacrifice their wives and children. However, in this case, what drove people to sell Chen Yuqing's daughter repeatedly wasn't devastating disaster. These families weren't at the point of starvation. On the contrary, she was trafficked to satisfy some more trivial needs. Chen Yuqing's daughter, Chen Shi, was born in a small village not far from the county town, adjacent to the expanding imperial capital, Beijing. In such a difficult famine year, Chen Yuqing, a rural scholar, still managed to arrange a marriage for his daughter. His son-in-law was named Li Guozhen, a 22-year-old young man from a neighboring village. However, life for the Li family was not peaceful. When floods submerged the Li family's fields, Li Guozhen and his father Li Mao saw Chen Shi as a good opportunity to turn things around. Over a year ago, marrying Chen Shi cost them a sum of money. Now, having borne a child for the Li family, Chen Shi became their movable property. In the local magistrate's archives, there exists a document, the divorce agreement that ended Li Guozhen and Chen Shi's marriage several months ago, roughly stating that due to encountering a disaster year, life was hard to sustain. The wife fled to her natal family, and each should fend for themselves. It was agreed to sell her for 400 strings of cash. Chen Shi served as divorce compensation to the Li family. The contract bore the hand and footprints of both parties. The Li family's demand of 400 strings of cash could be described as an outrageous overcharge. Well, this was almost the annual salary of a county magistrate, equivalent to several years' labor income for a peasant, sufficient to buy a new wife or several head of livestock. However, in late autumn of 1872, Li Mao brought his son to submit a petition demanding the return of Chen Shi. The petition stated that the divorce agreement was forged, and they had never considered selling Li Guozhen's wife. The divorce agreement dismissing Chen Shi, along with his son's palm and sole imprints in black ink, were all coerced and should not be valid. Chen Shi, the Li father and son also told the magistrate that Chen Shi was working as a servant in the home of a middle-aged man named Wu Guangyi, but Wu Guangyi forcibly detained Chen Shi and pressured the Li family to sign the divorce agreement at his home. At that time, it was not uncommon for women to be hired to help with farm work in other households or take on extra odd jobs to supplement family income. In Wu Guangyi's home, Chen Shi not only had to make and mend clothes for Wu Guangyi and his 75-year-old mother, but also weave cloth and embroider items for the Wu family to sell.
But according to the Li father and son's testimony, Chen Shi soon became a hostage in Wu Guangyi's household, and when they came to demand an explanation, they were also detained.
The other party pressured them, saying if they didn't sign the divorce agreement, they wouldn't be given food and wouldn't be released. Thus, the magistrate summoned the defendant Wu Guangyi to the yamen to undergo interrogation. Wu Guangyi was a prominent local figure who vehemently denied the accusations from the Li father and son. While the Li family portrayed Wu as a villain trying to seize a married woman, he claimed to be Chen Shi's savior and emphasized that the Lis were suing him to extort money again. And, proud way, he explained that Li Mao and his son had sold Chen Shi to a Jia family as a concubine for 400 strings of cash. Chen Shi's father, Chen Yuqing, being my friend, was deeply distressed and wanted to arrange a better marriage for his daughter. To rescue his friend's daughter, Wu Guangyi approached the Li family and offered to pay the money himself. After paying 400 strings to buy Chen Shi from Li Guozhen, he promptly brought the signed marriage contract to both the Chen family and himself.
Wu Guangji added that before handing the money to Li Guozhen, he hired a matchmaker and gathered witnesses.
He stressed his diligent efforts to observe proper marriage rites for Chen Shi, but unexpectedly the Li family returned demanding more money, using poverty as an excuse. This time, witnessed by two people, he gave another 550 strings of cash. After receiving payment, the Li father and son signed a pledge never to harass him again. Yet, they came back to extort and sued him. Countering Wu's account, the Li family claimed they never received said money, admitting only to renting Chen Shi to the Jias for 3 years as a childbearing concubine, but pleaded illiteracy. And they argued the contracts were manipulated by literate Wu Guangji and scholar Chen Yuqing, who deceived them to steal Chen Shi away. With both sides contradicting each other, Magistrate Ding couldn't discern the truth. And ultimately, the magistrate ruled that Chen Shi should be returned to her father Chen Yuqing with no penalties imposed in the case. Though Li Guazhen technically committed the crime of life selling, the magistrate recommended no punishment. His reasoning: every man involved could be charged with this offense, implying safety in numbers. The government turned a blind eye because natural disasters and wars overwhelmed relief efforts, forcing many families to rely on human trafficking for survival. Simply put, the imperial court viewed human trafficking as an alternative to population loss. In this environment, the individual plight of impoverished women was never a priority for officials. In this case, everyone treated Chen Shi as a commodity. Searching official archives reveals no testimony from Chen Shi herself. Through her silence, we see women's status and family in society. People exploited this young woman for their own purposes. The Li family mentioned her labor value when hired out, exchange value as a concubine, and reproductive value in child-rearing.
Father Chen Yuqing and childless middle-aged Wu Guanyi emphasized young Chen Shi's fertility in testimony. No one expressed shame over her trafficking.
Women were the floating wealth circulating among these families. Notably intertwined with this case was another lawsuit. Wu Guanyi, 75-year-old widowed mother, accused Yamen runner Li Shiram of colluding to extort money, but this suit was quickly dismissed. Yamen involvement in trafficking was common in late Qing localities. Late Qing magistrates had vast jurisdictions. Exhausted officials relied heavily on experienced local runners to govern. Poorly paid runners often exploited their positions for extra income through clever schemes. Here, regardless of his runner's involvement, Magistrate Ding turned a blind eye to avoid losing a capable assistant. In short, such trafficking of women persisted despite bans. Qing law did prohibit wife selling, but simultaneously, the law recognized women as property of fathers or husbands, granting male family heads significant authority. Under cover of marriage customs, bride prices, and chaotic times, many trafficking acts evaded punishment. Beyond women, trafficking of children and laborers was rampant, covered next in Part 2. Due to warfare, some families sold children to survive. But increasingly, unscrupulous individuals turned to child abduction, driven by violence. 26-year-old Zhao Er lived in Beijing's inner city, a down-and-out bannerman. Zhao Er was unmarried, like many bannermen of his generation. In late Qing, he could no longer receive regular stipends, and grain rations for lower-class bannerman families were dwindling. The subsidies for Zhao Er's parents were insufficient to support the family. Thus, Zhao Er had to make a living by peddling small goods on the street. In the autumn of 1875, Zhao Er noticed a little girl on the street who was always picking up coal chunks. The girl was named Zhang Fuji, and he saw her walking alone every day. Zhao Er conceived the idea of abducting her.
At sunset that day, Zhao Er carried Zhang Fuzhe onto a cart borrowed from his rickshaw friend Wang Zhen and threatened the girl.
If she screamed, she would be beaten. This 26-year-old street peddler wasn't a professional trafficker. He wanted to sell the girl for a big profit but didn't know who to sell her to. No, they're looking at. First, he raped the girl multiple times. Then, hearing that Long Zhen's mother, Long Jinshi, had a friend who wanted a child bride, he handed the girl over to Long Zhen to handle. Initially, Wang Zhen tried to sell the little girl and make a profit from it. But the prospective mother-in-law inspected her and, upon seeing the girl's horrifically injured private parts, told Wang Zhen that her son couldn't marry Zhang Fuji as a wife and sent the girl back. By this point, the two traffickers had exhausted all their contacts among relatives and friends. The pressure to place Zhang Fuji fell on Wang Zhen's mother, Wang Junshi, who had more social experience. They dead, estimating that Zhang Fuji couldn't be sold until she healed. Wang Junshi arranged for her to go to Granny Gao, the matchmaker's home. Granny Gao was an official matchmaker established by the local government in her village. The so-called official matchmaker is a professional who arranges marriages for the village men and women. Well acquainted with every household situation, such an official matchmaker also served as a broker for human trafficking. After obtaining Zhang Fuji, Granny Gao spread the word and eat. Soon after, an old woman contacted Granny Gao. She was a servant for a wealthy family named Qing, who needed another maidservant to serve the master's concubine. They instructed the servant to buy a maidservant. Granny Gao saw this as a good opportunity to get rid of the scarred girl. Thus, she quickly arranged to find a fortune teller, forged a document approving the sale, and sold Zhang Fuji to the Qing family for 180 taels of silver. Annie Gao gave the Qing family servant a kickback of 25 taels of silver and sent 80 taels to Wang Jinshi. She herself took 75 taels. Fortunately, Zhang Fuji had walked all over the city, picking up coal chunks. Quickly. For her, the area where the Qing family was located was not entirely unfamiliar. The new mistress would beat Zhang Fuji.
Zhang Fuji told the officers of the Beijing Infantry Battalion that she was beaten almost daily by the mistress, but the mistress also took her out to the town. 7 months had passed since her abduction.
Zhang Fuji finally managed to escape from the Qing family, found her way home by memory, and as soon as she got home, she told everything to her mother, who had been searching desperately for her, and said she could recognize one of the abductors. Thus, Zhang Fuji's mother persuaded the Beijing Yamen runners to thoroughly investigate the matter. Ultimately, Zha was punished with 100 strokes of the cane and exiled to a place 1,500 kilometers away. However, others involved in the sale avoided punishment using the excuse that they didn't know Zhang Fuji's background, and not a single member of the Qing family was questioned about the case. And by trafficking a little girl like Zhang Fuji, the traffickers made a profit of 180 taels, which can be described as profiting immensely with no investment. Moreover, this case reveals a terrifying social phenomenon. People have become accustomed to child trafficking, lack the will to rescue, and even want to participate in the trade to gain a share, and their actions often go unpunished. It should be noted that the abduction problem in late Qing was not limited to women and children. Some experienced traffickers were no longer satisfied with local business and began to focus on the larger-scale trafficking of overseas laborers. E-O-R-Y-T-C-R-T-T. In the 19th century, slaves in the powerful nations of Europe and America were emancipated, creating a vacuum lacking cheap labor. Whereas in China, the feudal society's slave system remained deeply rooted, and slaves or laborers were readily available, thus facilitating the overseas trafficking business. Chinese laborers became substitutes to fill the void left by slaves in European and American countries. To recruit enough laborers, traffickers used enticement and deception for young adult men, promoting the idea of free Chinese immigration and telling them they would make big money overseas. As for boys with labor ability, traffickers mostly used abduction and direct kidnapping. Ultimately, ships continuously transported forcibly recruited Chinese laborers overseas. Chinese laborers were first sold batch by batch in Macau. While crossing the vast Pacific, they were treated as cargo in the ship's hold. At the peak of the coolie trade, ships were extremely crowded, with laborers, or rather slaves, living in horrific conditions. On famous vessels like the Waverly, Dolores, Ugarte, and Fortune, Over a quarter died during the voyage. Gradually, as more children and laborers disappeared across rural China, rumors spread. Yet these rumors targeted not local traffickers, but foreigners, accusing them of sending abductors to harvest eyes and hearts for medicine or witchcraft. In port cities like Tianjin, Christian churches and missionaries became scapegoats. Rumors claimed nuns and missionaries who sheltered children were traffickers themselves, with orphanage deaths cited as proof. This rumor captured nationwide attention across social classes, giving traffickers new excuses. Some traffickers began claiming they stole children under orders from evil foreigners.
Ultimately, anti-foreign and anti-church fury erupted into a massacre that shocked the world. During the 1870 Tianjin massacre around Dragon Boat Festival, enraged crowds torched churches, looted orphanages, mission offices, and the French consulate. They then burned these buildings to the ground, killing every foreigner in sight.
In just 3 hours, mobs slaughtered 10 nuns, a French priest, 2 consular officials, 7 foreign bystanders, plus many Chinese converts. From then on, combating trafficking became more complex. Officials like Li Hongzhang had to negotiate with foreigners while projecting defiance to avoid public backlash. Anti-trafficking efforts were distracted by politics, yet the tragedies continued, making labor export restrictions urgent. On August 21, 1872, Li Hongzhang ordered customs to ban foreign recruitment of Chinese workers at coastal ports, especially Tianjin docks. To set an example, Li immediately executed 2 Chinese traffickers selling boys to foreign sailors. By 1874, he pushed to abolish the coolie trade entirely. Li Hongzhang hoped to usher in a new era where China and its citizens would gain international respect. Qing rulers finally realized that protecting overseas Chinese was a national duty. In the spring of 1905, King Chulalongkorn of Siam abolished slavery within his kingdom. This move won praise across East Asia, hailing him as an enlightened ruler resisting colonialism. Shanghai-based charity newspaper Datong Bao seized this moment to call for similar reforms in China. In 1910, the Qing court issued an edict comprehensively banning human trafficking and abolishing slavery. The millennia-old systems of master-servant relations and human trade finally became absolutely illegal. Though legally constrained, feudal society's deep-rooted slave mentality persisted, and the law itself contained feudal elements, like Article 7 requiring masters to arrange marriages for female servants, revealing patriarchal essence. This clause intended to remind masters to treat servants well, mandating households arrange marriages for female staff. Ironically, the law resulted in male slaves gaining freedom at 25, while female slaves of same age faced arranged marriages, often meaning resale. Many Republican-era novelists depicted young maids' lives under this law. Ba Jin portrayed servant Ming Feng in his classic novel, Family, depicting 20th-century domestic life. A 17-year-old indentured maid begged her mistress to let her remain a servant in the Gao household rather than be given away. When her plea to avoid becoming a concubine failed, she ended her life. Another maid, Wanner, married into the old man's household, where she was to become a concubine. Before leaving, she told a friend working next door, "When you burn paper offerings for Ming Feng, burn some for me too. Consider me dead." This, when slavery was supposedly abolished. 10 years later, while indentured servants' legal status nominally changed, structural reform hadn't occurred. For many, daily labor and living conditions remained unchanged. Soon, in January 1912, Child Emperor Puyi abdicated, establishing the Republic of China era.
Yet human trafficking customs persisted, and the new Republican government tried various methods to regulate, control, and ultimately ban these practices.
For example, in 1927, the government further approved nationwide regulations to emancipate slaves, stipulating that young girls serving as maidservants, or mizis, should be called adopted daughters. From then on, many child traffickers began using this legal term, adopted daughter, as a cover. While laws created barriers for the human trafficking market, other powerful new forces facilitated its expansion. Throughout the Republican era, North China's police and courts handled thousands of cases accusing family members, traffickers, and matchmakers of illegal abduction and trafficking. These institutions' detailed archives reveal not only legal system evolution, but also changing trafficking motives and improved public evasion tactics. On the evening of March 3, 1916, Officer Ma from Beijing Police arrested 7 men and 11 children at Yellow River Garden Brussels entrance, reflecting commercial sex's changing status in early republic. During Qing dynasty, prostitution was illegal but often tolerated. The new republic shifted policies toward legal registration and regulation. As an officially registered brothel, Yellow River Garden facilitated human trafficking both inside and outside its doors. Traffickers supplied young women to brothels nationwide through abduction, coercion, and exploitation of despair. Some families rationalized sacrificing daughters as virtuous support for relatives. Indenture contracts detailed debt service terms, while solemnly including marriage or rehabilitation plans to comply with law. But Officer Ma's arrests involved a different trade. This group traded young Beijing street children who disrupted commerce by begging at brothels and restaurants. They gathered along Lotus River corridors, singing, playing music, and performing acrobatics like somersaults. Early Republic Beijing saw population growth and commercial development, giving residents more leisure time and drawing them into public spaces. Behind these street-performing children lay a vast human trafficking network. At the police station, the Tianjia performers disclosed their origins. The 11 children, aged 6 to 16, mostly came to Beijing from surrounding regions. Each child claimed kinship with the 7 adults leading them, calling themselves sons, daughters, nephews, or adopted children. The men in the troupe emphasized that the street-performing children were under their care and upbringing, using this to justify their actions. Behind each child lay migration stories. They told recording officers what misfortunes led them to the streets. Their tragedies varied: crop failures, loss of mothers, girls given to uncles due to family decline. Several children hastily assured police, "They didn't beat me." But this statement precisely exposed what they denied. At that time, many Tianqiao performers lured poor families by recruiting apprentices for their opera troupes. These troupes posed as extended families with hierarchical order, but children faced severe beatings when earnings fell short. In another case, bruised children specified amounts. Failure to beg 2 strings of cash daily meant beatings. Police decisively removed children from abusive troupes, placing them in laundries. Some children were eventually reclaimed by remorseful parents, but archives never recorded the futures of those remaining under state care. Republican-era commercialization fueled trafficking for brothels and opera troupes. From the 1920s, expanding railways enabled large, cheap markets.
Train stations became playgrounds and trafficking hubs where abductors could strike and escape easily, drawing police attention.
Throughout the 1920s, newspapers reported rescues of trafficked children at stations around Chinese New Year. And clearly, Republican police viewed rescuing trafficked persons as vital public security duty. A sobering historical assessment. Sobering society modernized and legal systems advanced, trafficking became widely condemned as criminal, yet never truly vanished. In remote mountain villages, remnants like child brides and bought wives persist today. Renowned anthropologist James Watson once noted that before 1949, China had one of the world's largest and most comprehensive human trafficking markets. But regrettably, research on human trafficking in this land remained superficial, simplistically blamed on disasters, wars, and poverty. Today's book precisely fills this void. Author Susan Glosser explores feudal family values and marriage systems as foundational factors in her groundbreaking study of North China trafficking. Despite extremely limited historical sources, she reconstructs authentic population movement patterns of an era. As one reviewer noted, like her mentor Jonathan Spence, Glosser excels at weaving concrete, detailed cases and individual stories throughout. While examining legal and elite discourse on slavery, the book delves into traffickers' and victims' worlds, offering readers a rare, multifaceted historical perspective. All right, that concludes our discussion of human trafficking and family life in late Qing and Republican China. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.